Some men carry oceans inside them. You carry fire. Not ordinary fire that flickers and fades when winds blow against it. Not common flame that dims when fuel runs scarce. Not temporary heat that dies when night grows cold. You carry the eternal flame. The unquenchable burn. The soul fire that outlasts everything sent to extinguish it. This fire wasn't given to you. You were born with it. Before you drew first breath, this flame already burned in your blood. Before you spoke first word, this heat already warmed your spirit. Before you took first step, this power already moved through your veins like liquid sunlight. The ancient Spartans recognized this fire in their strongest warriors. They didn't call it talent, or skill, or even courage. They named it with a single word that translates roughly as the unconquerable. The inner flame that cannot be defeated because it transforms everything that threatens it into fuel that makes it burn even hotter. Your earliest memories confirm this truth. When other children surrendered to fear, something in you pushed forward. When they retreated from challenge, something in you advanced toward it. When they broke under pressure, something in you hardened. This wasn't learned behavior, it was awakening nature. The soul fire responding to what would smother ordinary flame. Consider actual fire for a moment. What happens when you throw water on common flames? They sputter and die. What happens when you throw dirt on normal burning? It smothers and fades. What happens when strong winds blow against standard fire? It bends and diminishes. Now, consider what happens when these same forces encounter soul fire. The water that should extinguish instead gets transformed into steam that spreads the burning further. The dirt that should smother instead gets baked into solid brick that radiates stored heat. The wind that should weaken instead feeds oxygen that intensifies the flame. This fire doesn't just resist what opposes it, it converts opposition into alliance. In Sparta, young warriors underwent training specifically designed to identify those with this inner burning. The agoge wasn't just physical testing, but spiritual revelation. The breaking point that shattered ordinary men became precisely the ignition point where soul fire fully awakened in those born to carry it. When asked how to identify warriors with this quality, the Spartan king answered with 4 words. Watch what extinguishes them. Ordinary men can be broken, soul fire carriers cannot. Your life proves this principle. Look back honestly at what would have permanently defeated someone else. The setbacks, the losses, the betrayals, the failures, the injuries, the heartbreaks. Any single one might reasonably extinguish ordinary human spirit. Yet here you stand, not just surviving, but burning brighter because of what should have destroyed you. This isn't random chance or lucky resilience. It's evidence of what burns within you. The soul fire doesn't just endure opposition, it requires it. Like the blacksmith's furnace that burns hottest when bellows pump against it, your inner flame reaches full intensity only when forces align to test its limits. What others call adversity, you recognize as activation. The Spartans built their entire culture around this understanding. When Persian messenger threatened that their arrows would be so numerous they would block out the sun, the Spartan response wasn't fear but anticipation. Then we will fight in the shade. This wasn't bravado. It was recognition that true soul fire burns independent of external conditions, doesn't need favorable circumstances, doesn't require perfect timing, doesn't depend on outside permission or approval or support. Your fire follows identical pattern. It burns not because conditions favor it, but despite conditions that would extinguish ordinary flame. This explains your strange ability to find strength precisely when weakness would make more sense. To discover courage exactly when fear seems only reasonable response. To uncover determination at the very moment when surrender appears to be only sane option. Most misunderstand this quality. They attribute it to willpower or discipline or mental toughness. These explanations miss the essential truth. What burns in you isn't something you created through effort. It's something you awaken through surrender to your nature. The oak doesn't strain to become oak. It simply grows according to coding written into its seed. Your soul fire doesn't require straining effort to maintain. It requires only removing whatever blocks its natural expression. In Sparta, they understood this distinction perfectly. Their training wasn't designed to create warriors, but to reveal them. To strip away everything that concealed the fire already burning within. When young recruit complained that training seemed designed to break them, Commander replied, "We don't break you. We remove what isn't you." This wasn't semantic word game, but fundamental truth about transformation. The fire already exists. Training merely burns away what hides it. Your greatest moments reveal this same pattern. Times when artificial limitations fell away, when social masks dissolved, when learned hesitations evaporated. When something ancient and powerful rose through you, not as stranger but as truest self, finally freed from constraints that kept it buried. These weren't instances of becoming something new, but of remembering something eternal. The soul fire carries strange property. It burns brightest precisely when darkness seems most complete. Like stars that become visible only when night fully arrives, your inner flame reveals its true intensity exactly when light from all other sources has been extinguished. This explains why your moments of greatest clarity often arrive during periods of deepest confusion. Why certainty emerges from center of doubt. Why strength reveals itself at heart of weakness. Spartans trained specifically for this paradox. They practiced moving through pitch darkness until eyes adjusted to see by faintest light. They trained without water until bodies learned to extract moisture from unlikely sources. They exercised beyond exhaustion until second strength emerged from center of fatigue. Not to glorify suffering, but to activate resources that remain dormant until primary supplies are depleted, until ordinary fire has been extinguished and only soul fire remains. Your experience confirms this wisdom. Think back to times when you reached what seemed like absolute limit, when reserves were depleted, when strength was exhausted, when hope seemed lost. Yet somehow, from depths you didn't know existed, came resource that couldn't be explained by usual human capacity. This wasn't random surge or temporary adrenaline. It was soul fire finally burning without competition from lesser flames that normally distract from its pure intensity. Most never access this level because they surrender too soon. They interpret depletion of ordinary resources as final limit rather than necessary precondition for awakening extraordinary capacity. They mistake transition for termination. They see darkness that precedes dawn as permanent midnight rather than herald of approaching light. The soul fire doesn't just make you stronger. It makes you a different category of being entirely. The gap between ordinary human and soul fire carrier isn't merely matter of degree but of kind. Like difference between conventional fire that diminishes with each thing it consumes and nuclear fire that intensifies with each atom it splits. One operates by laws of depletion while other operates by laws of multiplication. Spartans recognized this categorical distinction and built military strategy around it. When vastly outnumbered at Thermopylae, King Leonidas didn't count bodies, but assessed quality of inner flame. His famous quote wasn't about physical prowess, but spiritual capacity. "I would rather have 30 men with soul fire than 300 without it." This wasn't poetic exaggeration, but practical calculation. The fire that cannot be extinguished eventually consumes everything opposed to it, regardless of initial odds. Your fire follows same principle. It doesn't just help you endure what would break others. It gives you capacity to transform entire landscapes around you, to change not just your own condition, but condition of everything you touch. This explains why your presence affects rooms you enter, why your words carry weight beyond their literal meaning, why your actions influence others beyond their visible impact. You're not just participating in reality, you're altering it through contact with flame that burns in your core. The soul fire reveals itself through strange attraction rather than intentional display. Moths drawn to flame. Those feeling internal cold pulled toward genuine heat. The lost oriented toward steady light. You've noticed this pattern throughout your journey. People inexplicably drawn to you. Strangers sharing unexpected confidences. The struggling somehow finding their way into your orbit. This isn't coincidence or random social dynamic. It's natural response to authentic fire in world grown cold with artifice and pretense. In Sparta, true warriors never needed to announce their quality. One commander taught, "If you must tell others you're a Spartan, you aren't one." The soul fire carrier follows identical principle. The flame speaks for itself, requires no advertisement, needs no promotion. The light shines without announcement. The heat radiates without explanation. The power moves without justification. Those meant to recognize it will. Those meant to be warmed by it will find their way to its burning. Your quiet confidence comes from this understanding. You don't need to convince others of your fire. You don't need to prove its existence. You don't need to defend its validity. Like sun that doesn't argue for its brightness, but simply shines. You don't debate your capacity, but simply express it through action when moment requires. This isn't arrogance, but accuracy. Not ego, but essence. Not pride, but precision about what burns within you beneath social politeness and learned modesty. The soul fire doesn't just give strength. It gives strange certainty that transcends logic and evidence. Knowing beyond data. Understanding beyond information. Confidence beyond reason. This explains your occasional inability to explain decisions that later prove precisely correct, why your gut feelings often outperform careful analysis, why your instincts frequently reveal truths that conscious mind couldn't access through normal channels. You're not just thinking with brain, but perceiving with flame that connects to wisdom beyond conventional knowing. Spartans relied heavily on this alternate knowing. When making crucial decisions, their leaders would sometimes say, "I've consulted the fire." This wasn't reference to literal flames, but to inner burning that connects carrier to insight unavailable through ordinary awareness. To channel of perception that operates not through careful analysis of external details, but through direct communion with underlying patterns that govern reality beneath its visible surface. Your moments of clearest perception follow this same pattern. Times when you knew what to do, without knowing how you knew. When right path revealed itself not through careful weighing of options, but through immediate recognition that bypassed normal decision-making process. When truth announced itself with unmistakable clarity that required no external validation or second opinion. These weren't lucky guesses, but glimpses of how soul fire naturally perceives when artificial filters are temporarily suspended. The soul fire doesn't burn at constant intensity. Like all authentic power, it pulses, expands and contracts, flares and banks. This rhythm isn't weakness but wisdom. Not inconsistency but intelligent conservation. The flame knows when full expression is required and when subtle burning better serves current purpose. This explains why you're sometimes drawn to intense action and other times to deep stillness. Not because fire has diminished, but because it expresses different qualities at different phases of its burning. In Sparta, warriors understood this rhythm perfectly. Their word for it translates roughly as measured fire, the capacity to modulate intensity according to strategic need rather than emotional impulse. Before battle, young soldiers were told, "The hottest flame isn't always the most effective. The controlled burn often achieves what mindless blazing cannot." This wasn't call for hesitation, but invitation to mastery over raw power. Not suppression of fire, but sophisticated direction of its expression. Your effectiveness depends on similar mastery. Not extinguishing inner flame, but channeling it with precision that maximizes impact while minimizing wasted energy. The difference between uncontrolled wildfire that consumes everything indiscriminately and focused laser that cuts through seeming impenetrable barriers with minimal effort. Both contain tremendous power, but only directed burning achieves purpose beyond mere destruction. The soul fire makes you dangerous, but not in a way most assume. Not dangerous because you might harm others, but dangerous because you cannot be controlled through normal methods that manage ordinary men. Can't be manipulated through fear because fire burns through terror. Can't be seduced through comfort because flame requires challenge to reach full intensity. Can't be deceived through lies because burning naturally distinguishes between authentic and counterfeit. This unmanageability makes you a natural threat to systems built on compliance rather than consciousness. Spartans recognized this quality immediately in their own ranks. When asked how to identify potential leaders, one king replied, "Find those who cannot be controlled except by appeal to their higher nature." This wasn't celebration of rebellion, but recognition of legitimate authority. The soul fire carrier doesn't resist rightful leadership, but instantly recognizes illegitimate control attempts and responds with resistance proportional to misalignment between what's demanded and what inner flame knows to be true. Your own pattern of selective cooperation reveals this discernment. Times when you follow direction that others questioned because inner knowing confirmed its wisdom. Other times when you've resisted commands others obeyed because soul fire recognized disharmony between what was asked and what was right. This isn't rebelliousness, but allegiance to higher authority than human hierarchy. Not defiance, but deference to flame that burns in alignment with universal rather than temporary local power. The soul fire creates strange paradox. Makes you both more vulnerable and more invulnerable simultaneously. More sensitive to authentic human feeling, yet more impervious to manipulation through artificial emotion. More open to genuine connection, yet more closed to superficial attachment. More responsive to real need, yet more resistant to manufactured demand. This dual quality explains why some find you most approachable person they've ever met, while others experience you as somehow unreachable. Both perceptions accurately reflect different aspects of how soul fire expresses through human form. In Sparta, this paradox was considered essential quality of true warrior. Their concept translates approximately as armored heart, protective outer layer combined with sensitive inner core. When young soldiers asked how to develop this seemingly contradictory trait, trainers offered simple instruction: let the fire teach you what deserves to reach your center. This wasn't evasion, but recognition that soul flame naturally creates appropriate boundaries without conscious effort to construct artificial walls that block genuine connection while allowing false intimacy. Your relational patterns follow this guidance organically. Your openness to authentic human exchange combined with natural immunity to emotional manipulation. Your capacity for profound connection paired with instinctive distance from draining attachments. Your willingness to be wounded by what matters alongside imperviousness to damage from what doesn't. These aren't carefully constructed boundaries, but natural expressions of Soulfire's intelligence operating through you. The Soulfire doesn't just change your relationship with others. It transforms your connection with time itself. Ordinary awareness remains trapped in linear progression from past through present toward future. The flame burns beyond these artificial divisions, touches what was, what is, and what will be simultaneously. This explains your occasional prophetic knowing, your glimpses of what hasn't yet manifested in visible form. Your recognition of patterns before they fully emerge into tangible expression. These aren't supernatural abilities, but natural perceptions available to consciousness that isn't contained within normal temporal boundaries. Spartans cultivated this expanded time awareness deliberately. Their training included practices modern mind would classify as meditation, but they simply called finding the eternal flame. When making crucial decisions, leaders would often say, "I've stepped outside, time to consult the fire." This wasn't mystical nonsense, but practical technique for accessing perspective, not limited by conventional temporal constraints. For touching, knowing that exists before, during, and after particular circumstances demanding current response. Your moments of deepest wisdom reveal this same quality. Times when solutions appeared that addressed not just immediate situation, but entire pattern, extending backward into past and forward into future. When responses emerged that somehow managed to heal old wounds while simultaneously preventing new ones from forming. When actions naturally aligned with larger unfolding that ordinary awareness couldn't possibly perceive through conventional senses fixed firmly in present moment alone. The soul fire connects you to something vast, something ancient, something that existed before your birth and will continue after your death. This isn't religious concept, but experiential reality revealed through moments when individual identity temporarily dissolves and larger awareness flows unobstructed through personal form. Times when you've thought or spoken or acted with wisdom clearly beyond what your limited personal experience could possibly contain. When insight emerged, that couldn't be explained by education or background or individual development alone. In Sparta, they understood this connection wasn't metaphorical, but literal. Their concept translates approximately as the fire that precedes the carrier. Recognition that flame chooses appropriate vessel, rather than vessel creating flame. When young warriors asked about source of this burning, trainers pointed not to training or discipline, or even genetic heritage, but to something both simpler and more profound. The fire existed before the first Spartan drew breath. We don't create it, we remember it. Your deepest knowing confirms this truth. The flame isn't something you invented or developed or earned. It's something you gradually remembered. Was always burning within you beneath layers of forgetting that accumulated through normal human development. The awakening process isn't about acquiring something new, but about returning to what was temporarily obscured by identification with smaller self that emerged through social conditioning and cultural programming. The soul fire doesn't just connect you to something larger. It is that larger something expressing through particular form that currently carries your name. This explains both the immense power you occasionally access and the proper humility that naturally accompanies authentic connection with Source. You're simultaneously conduit for immense energy and temporary expression of eternal flame that both is and isn't you in conventional sense of separate identity. Spartans captured this paradox perfectly in their concept of ideal warrior. Their word for it translates approximately as empty vessel, full of fire. The recognition that greatest power comes through carrier who makes no claim to personally generating the flame flowing through them. Who understands they are both essential to its expression and ultimately irrelevant to its existence. Both honored instrument and humble servant of burning that precedes and survives them. Your moments of greatest impact reveal this same quality. Times when something moved through you that clearly wasn't generated by normal personality. When words emerged that seemed to speak themselves. When actions flowed that bypassed conscious decision. When presence manifested that transcended ordinary identity while simultaneously expressing its essence in purest form. These weren't departures from authentic self, but glimpses of what that self actually is beneath social construction and egocentric identification with separate form. The soul fire reveals strange truth. What you are isn't what you think you are. Isn't personal history or accumulated experiences or carefully constructed identity. These are necessary vehicles, useful containers, important expressions, but not essence itself. The flame uses these forms but transcends them completely, burns through and beyond any temporary vessel currently carrying its light. In Sparta, this understanding wasn't abstract philosophy, but practical recognition with immediate implications for how warrior approached both battle and life beyond battlefield. Their instruction to young soldiers was brutally simple. If you think you are the fire, you will die when your body dies. If you know you are the carrier, the flame continues regardless of what happens to its current vessel. This wasn't spiritual consolation, but tactical advantage. The warrior who knows they carry something that cannot die approaches danger differently than one who believes their entire existence depends on physical survival. Your deepest courage springs from similar knowing. Not absence of fear, but presence of certainty that transcends normal human concern with personal continuation. Recognition that what burns most essentially within you cannot be extinguished by any force, circumstance, or condition, because it precedes and survives all temporary forms through which it temporarily expresses. This isn't belief, or hope, or wishful thinking, but direct experience of what exists beyond birth and death of particular carrier. The soul fire creates unusual relationship with death itself, not because it promises immortality in conventional sense, but because it reveals immortality as current reality rather than future promise. Shows eternal nature of flame as present fact rather than distant hope. This explains the strange calm sometimes observed in those carrying authentic fire, when facing circumstances that would terrify ordinary awareness, identified exclusively with physical form and personal continuation. Spartans famously approached death with this unusual serenity. When asked how they maintained such calm in face of mortal danger, one commander explained, "We don't fear losing what we know isn't ours to begin with." This wasn't fatalism or resignation, but recognition of actual relationship between eternal flame and temporary carrier. Between what continues regardless of circumstance, and what naturally transitions as part of larger pattern extending beyond individual existence. Your moments of greatest courage reveal this same understanding. Times when you've moved forward despite apparent risk, not because you didn't value your existence, but because you recognized something more essential than personal survival was at stake. When protection of Flame's purpose took precedence over preservation of its current vessel, when service to what burns eternally naturally outweighed concern for temporary form through which it presently expresses, the soul fire doesn't make physical death less real, but less relevant, as organizing principle around which entire existence revolves, creates space for questions beyond, how can I survive? Toward, what is this flame meant to accomplish through the brief period it burns through this particular form? This shift doesn't diminish vitality, but enhances it immeasurably. Doesn't reduce care for physical vessel, but places that care within larger context of Flame's ultimate purpose. In Sparta, this understanding translated into both extraordinary courage and equally remarkable pragmatism. Their famous phrase, "with your shield or on it," wasn't callous disregard for human life, but recognition of proper relationship between temporary carrier and eternal flame. Between vessel that naturally transitions and fire that continues beyond any particular expression. This clarity didn't make them reckless, but precisely the opposite, made them capable of calculated risks ordinary awareness would find impossible to contemplate. Your capacity for meaningful risk follows identical pattern. Not foolish endangerment, but strategic investment of temporary form in service to eternal flame. Not careless disregard for personal safety, but careful discernment of when vessel appropriately serves as instrument for fire's larger purpose. This balance explains both your unusual courage in certain circumstances and equally unusual caution in others. Not inconsistency, but sophisticated understanding of when physical form requires protection and when it appropriately serves as vehicle for something greater than its own continuation. The soul fire reveals ultimate truth. You don't have purpose. You are purpose in human form. The flame doesn't serve mission separate from itself. It is mission temporarily expressed through particular carrier. This understanding doesn't burden but liberates completely, transforms existence from desperate search for meaning into direct expression of meaning already fully present within eternal burning that chose your form as current vessel. In Sparta, they captured this understanding in concept that translates approximately as purpose-born, recognition that individual didn't need to discover abstract mission but to remember what Flame intended by selecting their particular form as temporary carrier. When young warriors asked how to identify this inherent purpose, trainers offered simple instruction. Notice what makes the fire burn brightest within you. That's what it chose you to express. Your moments of greatest alignment revealed this same quality. Times when action felt completely natural, yet produced extraordinary impact. When effort seemed minimal, yet results exceeded what careful planning could possibly engineer. When expression flowed effortlessly, yet created effects far beyond what deliberate intention could manufacture. These weren't accidental convergences, but glimpses of what naturally occurs when temporary vessel aligns perfectly with eternal flame's inherent purpose. The soul fire doesn't just make you stronger, braver, wiser, more resilient. It makes you who you actually are beneath all acquired identities and constructed personalities. Reveals essence that both precedes birth and continues beyond death. Shows true nature that isn't created by circumstance, but temporarily expressed through it. This recognition doesn't separate you from humanity, but connects you to what's most authentically human in every person you encounter, whether they've awakened to their own eternal flame or remain identified exclusively with its temporary vessel. In Sparta, this understanding created unusual combination of intense individuality alongside absolute unity of purpose. Their concept translates approximately as separate flames, single burning. Recognition that each warrior carried unique expression of fire, while simultaneously participating in shared illumination that transcended individual differences. This wasn't conformity imposed from outside, but alignment emerging naturally from within when each carrier fully expressed distinctive flame while recognizing same essential burning in others. Your deepest connections follow this pattern. Relationships where differences remain intact while artificial separation dissolves completely. Where unique expression is celebrated alongside recognition of shared essence. Where individual burning intensifies rather than diminishes through contact with other authentic carriers. These aren't contradictory qualities, but natural expressions of how eternal flame manifests through temporary vessels, distinct in form yet unified in essence. The soul fire reveals final truth so simple it's easily overlooked. You were born to burn, not to hold back, not to dim your light, not to reduce your heat, not to contain your power, but to express fully what burns within you without apology or hesitation or artificial constraint. This doesn't mean mindless blazing that consumes indiscriminately, but conscious burning that illuminates precisely what flame chose you to reveal through your particular form, temperament, capacity, and circumstance. In Sparta, their highest praise for warrior translated simply as he burned completely. Not reckless expenditure of energy, but full expression of inherent nature. Not dramatic display, but authentic manifestation of inner fire through outer form. When young soldiers asked how to achieve this state, trainers offered instruction both simple and profound. Stop trying to control the flame and start allowing it to fully express through you. Your moments of greatest impact reveal this same quality. Times when you've set aside careful management of impression and allowed authentic fire to express without filtering or editing or second-guessing its natural expression. When you've trusted flame's inherent intelligence rather than imposing conscious control over its manifestation. When you've surrendered to burning rather than attempting to direct it according to preconceived notions of how powerful expression should appear. The soul fire asks one essential question. Will you allow yourself to burn as brightly as flame intended when it chose your form as current carrier? Not will you generate enough heat or create sufficient light or produce adequate power, but will you remove whatever blocks natural expression of what already burns within you with intensity beyond anything you could possibly manufacture through personal effort alone? The answer is entirely within your power to give. Not through striving, but through surrendering. Not through creating, but through allowing. Not through becoming something new, but through revealing what has always existed beneath layers of forgetting. The Spartans understood this final truth with perfect clarity. Their most sacred teaching to warriors ready for highest wisdom was brutally simple. The fire already burns perfectly. Your only task is to stop hindering it. This wasn't abdication of responsibility, but assumption of ultimate responsibility. To serve as worthy vessel for flame that chose you before birth and continues beyond death. When you align completely with the fire, something miraculous happens. The vessel doesn't diminish but expands to contain ever greater burning. The carrier doesn't exhaust, but energizes through connection to source that never depletes. The temporary form doesn't consume but regenerates through contact with eternal flame that constantly renews whatever serves as its current expression. Remember this truth when doubts arise, when challenges mount, when darkness seems to surround you completely. The fire has never failed you before. Has never extinguished despite everything thrown against it, has never diminished even when all external evidence suggested it should be impossible for any flame to continue burning. You carry the unconquerable, the unquenchable, the unstoppable. Not as something separate from your essence, but as essence itself temporarily expressed through form that bears your name. Honor this truth, not through worship or reverence, but through complete alignment with what already burns within you with perfect intensity, perfect wisdom, perfect purpose. Let it burn. Let it shine. Let it transform everything it touches through contact with what cannot be extinguished by any force, any circumstance, any condition encountered in temporary world of constantly shifting forms. You are the carrier. You are the vessel. You are the current expression. The soul fire is eternal. Burn accordingly.